This episode is brought to you by my fertility awareness programs. Master fertility awareness and improve your menstrual cycle health at the same time. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/workwithme for more information. That's fertilityfriday.com/workwithme. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 198. Welcome to the 198th episode of the Fertility Friday podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Lisa from fertilityfriday.com, and this is your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. I recently created a free 3-part video series all about the fertility awareness method and how you can utilize the fertility awareness method to develop body literacy. So to really connect you with your cycles and really understand what's happening in your body. And so if you haven't had a chance to get your copy of my free video series, make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/FAM101. That's fertilityfriday.com/FAM101 to gain access to my 3-part video series all about fertility awareness charting. So again, that's fertilityfriday.com/FAM101. I've got a great episode for you today. In today's episode, I am inviting Angelique Panagos back to the show. So for those of you who have listened to the show for a while, you'll remember that back in episode 51, that's when I had Angelique on the show for the first time. And in today's show, we're actually talking about her new book, The Balance Plan. So really excited to jump into that with her today. And so I love the title of the book, Balance Plan, just because I like the idea of balance. I'm the type of person that typically does not advocate for super extreme anything really, whether it's a super extreme diet where it's really restrictive or whether it's really extreme adherence to certain principles or protocols. You know, what I believe is that we all have to live our life. And ultimately, what I love about charting your cycle is that it brings you closer to, it gives you the possibility to develop balance in that you really get to see how different things affect you. So, you know, in today's episode, we're talking a lot about diet and how that can affect your hormones and all of those things. And the great thing about charting is that when you chart your cycles, you get this real-time measure of how all of these different factors affect you personally. It really brings out different things for different women. So for instance, if your diet is super, super low on protein and fat, then that's often reflected in your chart. You'll see evidence that your body is struggling to make hormones right there on your chart. And so that can help to shift you in the right direction by really paying attention to what your body's saying and focusing on what your body needs. And in the same way, if you have a food allergy or sensitivity, or there's some sort of food that disturbs you, then often your chart will give you additional evidence that perhaps that particular food isn't right for you, or when you eat this thing or drink this thing or whatever it is, you can see exactly how it's affecting you. And so I find that with charting, it's easier to take a more balanced approach because the evidence is right there for you. And if you try to do something really extreme or eliminate something or, add something in or whatever the case is for you, you get that real-time feedback as to how it's affecting you specifically. And so if you're relatively new to charting, or even if you have, several months or even a year or more of charting under your belt, but you're still struggling to interpret what you're seeing on your charts, you're really wanting to get clear on what information you can derive about your overall health and fertility from your menstrual cycle charts, I offer a number of programs to support you in doing just that. So make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/workwithme to take a look at the different programs that I offer and the different ways that we can work together. And also, if you're not sure which program would be the best fit, you can always set up a complimentary 50-minute consultation with me where we can actually go through and talk about the different programs that they offer and where would be the best fit for you. So again, that's fertilityfriday.com/workwithme. Now let's jump into today's episode. And today I'm excited to welcome back Angelique Panagos to the show. Angelique is a writer, foodie, and health crusader with an immense passion for the healing power of food. Angelique is a nutritional therapist with her own successful West End practice specializing in female health, stress, and digestion. And she's also the author of her new book, The Balance Plan, which is a diet and lifestyle approach to balancing hormones. And so for those of you who've been listening to the show for quite a while, you might remember that Angelique was a guest on the show back in episode number 51. So in that episode, we talked about the impact of sugar consumption on fertility. So if you haven't listened to that, I would definitely recommend to go back. It was a great episode. And so in today's show, we're going to be talking about the importance of real food, eating to support gut health, sleep, lifestyle changes, and how all these pertain to balancing hormones and why that's important for menstrual cycle health and fertility. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Angelique.
Hi, thanks so much for having me back.
Well, thanks for coming back to the show, and congratulations on your new book. We were gushing over it earlier. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
I
Thank
can
you
see
very
that you put a lot of love and time and care into your book. So maybe we can start there. Maybe you can share, I gave a brief introduction, but maybe you can share a little bit about your background and what led you to write this book at this time.
Okay, amazing. So I'm absolutely thrilled that you feel that a lot of love went into the book, because it absolutely did. I was actually writing the book when I was pregnant with my daughter, who's a year old now, and I was very pregnant, and I was thinking how grateful I was that I'd actually reached this point of pregnancy, because I've had 2 miscarriages, and the last miscarriage that I had was actually 2 months before we fell pregnant with Isabella. And so while I was writing the book, all the emotion that went into it as well from my own personal experience really just propelled me to dig even deeper and to really get my message quite clear as to all the different things that we need to do for hormonal balance. My story, if anything, attests to how resilient the body actually is and how much the body can go through. I personally have polycystic ovaries. I had Hashimoto's, which ended up in an underactive thyroid. I've suffered from eating disorders in the past, bulimia, anorexia, binge eating disorder. I've also been recently diagnosed with adenomyosis, which is a uterine endometriosis, something that I suspected for a very long time. So I'm definitely no stranger to hormonal conditions. And I was brought up in a Greek-Italian home in sunny South Africa, and that meant that we had a license to eat. So I definitely have eaten a lot in my day. And I always had this really grounded foundation into what food can do for the body, because my mum was always into naturopathy and homeopathy and nutrition. And when I was about 18, 19, let's just take that a little bit back. I started menstruating. I'm the girl that started menstruating at 10 years old. I started very early. And it was a horrible affair from that first bleed. It was so painful. It was nauseating. I had to go home from school and then later from work. So I never had this relationship with a good relationship with my own body and period. I would dread it. And when I was about 18, I started partying like a rock star. I just went out a lot. I drank a lot. I ate so badly. And my already irregular periods then just became non-existent. So I knew they were meant to come. I just had no idea when they were going to come. So I was going 90 days at a time without a period. But I would be PMSing the whole time during that 90 days. So, I was great fun to be around. I was just like, the moody cow friend. And then as soon as my period came, I'd phone people up and say, I'm so sorry, I was so grumpy. I'm actually a nice person, just not in the 30 days or 90 days before my next period. So what happened in that case, it was my lifestyle was causing my period to change. And it's not something that I realized at the time, but hindsight is an amazing thing. And my environment also caused a possible predisposition to having a thyroid condition to actually happen. The way I see it, the saying goes, your genes load the trigger, but your genes load the gun and your lifestyle pulls the trigger. Mm-hmm. And I definitely feel that my lifestyle at that point was a big catalyst in Hashimoto's, in PCOS being as driven and as, I call it awake. The PCOS was awake, like the beast was awake, and all the conditions that came with that. So, the belly fat as well, that was just ever growing. So, it was definitely a lifestyle change that actually saw a massive change in my cycle and in my period as well. And I think that was a major catalyst in me wanting to write this book, because I came a really long way from that time to get to this place. I call it the promised land of this hormonal freedom and this food freedom as well. And it was when I got to that point where I was menstruating properly, I got it down to 30 to 35 days, and I was stable in my weight, which was a big, and I think a lot of women can relate to this. It was a big factor in my life. Everything was around revolving around, would that make me put on weight or not? And when I got to that point, I really wanted to share that knowledge with others. And I was very fortunate that I was able to be given this opportunity. I see it as a privilege to be able to write this book and to reach as many people as I can with it.
Well, let's talk about some of the kind of the ways that to overcome this. So some of the things that you did personally, and then some of the things that you spoke about in the book. But the book is called the Balance Plan. And so what was it for you that made the biggest difference? What I noticed as I went through the book is that the theme of balance seems to come across. So when you're talking about meals and things like that, it feels like it's not meant to be extreme. It feels that you're meant to strike some sort of a balance between in kind of all areas. So maybe just share with us what made the biggest difference for you when you finally saw that shift in your menstrual cycle, in your periods, and all of those things.
I think the key there is what you said, is about finding that balance, because I've been on either side. So I've been on the perfectionist side when I was going through the eating disorders, and that didn't do my body any favors. And then I've been on the other side where I actually just didn't care, and I was eating everything that I could possibly find, and mainly sugary foods, carbohydrate-rich foods, and that didn't do my hormones and my period any favors either. But it's about finding that consistency above perfection is what I like to say. When I was able to find that balance where I was able to do things consistently as opposed to being perfectionist or not caring at all, that's when things started to shift. And those shifts mainly for me personally, and what I see a lot in my clinic and with my clients, is the reduction of sugary, carbohydrate-rich foods and the addition of good fats and good quality proteins.
Well, let's start there. That is that's what we talked about in our first interview, so we won't stay on there forever, but it's a really big deal for a lot of women. I work with a lot of women, and finding ways to reduce the sugar consumption, that's a very big topic, because many of us, myself included, have been, addicted to sugar at some point in one way or another. And it's one of the most challenging things to kind of beat those cravings. So in the book, you talk about different ways to go at that. And I think what's interesting is that some of the ways to do it may not be what you think. So maybe share with us, for all of the listeners who happen to be in that boat of, I crave the sugar and I crave it every day. So what have you got for me, Angelique?
So first of all, you're not alone. I was definitely the sugar monster, and I just wanted it all the time. And then I realized that the sugar monster actually equals the wrinkle monster as well. So has a major impact on skin, as a side note. But for me, especially when I'm working with clients, is finding what the trigger is. So there's different things that can cause that need for something sweet, and it's probably a block of sugar is not going to help. It will probably need to be a chocolate or whatever your go-to is. And I find that the first thing we need to differentiate between is whether we've been conditioned by the media to believe that when we about to come on our period that we need a block of chocolate, because those are the messages that we are given as women. You're feeling sad, eat some chocolate. You're coming on your period, eat some chocolate. So these are things that we are programmed to believe because we see them all the time. And then the other thing is, are we deficient in any nutrients that we may be lacking in? So if you are, like I was, the absolute sugar monster, then maybe adding in a few different things into the diet can be really helpful. And one of those things that I found, I call it like my secret weapon, is cinnamon. Something so simple, but adding some cinnamon into the diet can be really helpful. It helps the cells become more sensitive to insulin, so therefore we can get the sugar into the cells and out of the bloodstream a lot quicker, so that helps with blood sugar balance. Another thing, as I've mentioned, blood sugar balance, is to actually, in order to reduce your cravings, you need to be eating a balanced diet. Now that sounds so boring, like what is a balanced diet? But it's really about eating as close to nature as possible. So getting in good quality protein with every meal or snack, and not fearing carbohydrates. I think that's the other thing that we're now dealing with, is the fact that we've been told that carbohydrates are the devil and we need to run as far away from them as possible. But we actually need complex carbohydrates in our diet. So, favoring things like sweet potato or brown rice, quinoa, those type of foods can be really helpful as well. And I guess, and this is a really hard one. This is where you have to be really honest with yourself when you're looking at cravings as well, is like, are you craving something out of habit or boredom? And identifying those. So when you are wanting to go for a block of chocolate or anything like that, is really thinking about what is the drive behind that. I find that really helpful for myself and with my clients as well. And then planning ahead is a key one. So having the right type of snacks at hand, because if you are someone that does need snacks, we're all biochemically individual, so we all need different things. So if you do want snacks, maybe having a protein-rich snack available to you is going to be the answer. So that could be some boiled eggs, for example, with some cherry tomatoes that you could easily keep in a container and eat that. Or it could be having a pack of nuts. And I know sometimes it's like nuts are so boring, but maybe you could get to roasting some chickpeas instead and having those as a snack, so that they're not just the same old boring stuff. And I say boring, I love nuts, but sometimes I look at my clients' faces and they're just like, oh God, please just don't tell me just to have a handful of nuts instead of a piece of chocolate. So I get that, we live in the real world here, but the nutrients that you're going to be getting from nuts could actually be helping reduce your cravings. And one of those is magnesium, for example.
Mm-hmm. Well, and what I like about how you talk about managing cravings is the importance of consuming enough protein and fat, and really having that understanding that fat doesn't make you fat, and it's important to have fat. I know when I'm working with clients and we're kind of looking at the diet, one of the things that I often notice, and I'll find myself saying this a lot, is I'll say like, well, where's the food? Like, of course you're eating sugar. You're hungry.
Yeah. Where's the food?
Yeah.
I love that.
So maybe you could just talk a little bit about like what that balance means, and for like two things, like for somebody who isn't used to consuming fat, what do you have to tell them? Like how do you describe why we need to have fat and how that relates to the cravings? And then a second question I'll throw in there is what do you do for your clients who don't eat meat, your clients who are vegetarian or vegan? Because I find that to be particularly challenging when you see what the diet is, because often the diet is quite carbohydrate heavy and low on the protein and fat.
Absolutely. So let's tackle that. What is fat and why you need it? So I think one of the biggest experiments that we were put into unknowingly, but we didn't opt into, was this whole fat-free craze. And we're talking like decades ago, where they removed the fat from the diet and they replaced it with sugar, because when you remove fat from something, you remove the flavor as well. So what's happened there then is now we're all on this fat-free craze, and I put my hand up really high and say that if there was a fat-free product on the market, I've probably consumed it, because I totally bought into that whole way of thinking. And then I'm also going to put my hand up even higher and say that if fat-free worked, we'd all be supermodels then. It doesn't work. And fats are essential for hormonal function. They're actually essential for us to be able to synthesize our sex hormones and our stress hormone. So, and we're talking about all fats here, including what's dubbed as the bad cholesterol, which is your LDL cholesterol. Those are the blueprint of our hormones. So we eat fat and it actually gets converted into something called pregnenolone, and then that gets converted further down into progesterone, cortisol, which is your stress hormone, estrogen, testosterone. So it's really essential for your normal day-to-day functioning, as well as getting that ovulation, getting your period regular, and menstruation, so therefore fertility as well. So that's the first thing that I always discuss that with clients, because when we talk about fertility, we're not just talking about being pregnant right now. What we're talking about is just functioning as a woman, functioning, being balanced, having that homeostasis, the body is functioning as it should. And so if we're talking about fertility and periods, our body wants to ovulate every month, whether we've decided to fall pregnant or not. That is what our body is striving for. And we need the right hormones to do that. Therefore, we need the building blocks. So fat is your building block. Not only for hormones, but every single cell is made up of fat. Your brain is made up of fat. there's the right fat that cushions your organs in the body. Your end of your nerves are made, your myelin sheaths, which are your nerve endings, are made up of fat. So if we didn't have that, just walking down the street would be excruciatingly sore if we could even do that. So it's so important. And when we're talking about fats, we're not talking about hydrogenated and trans fatty acids. And those are the type of fats that you would find in donuts, for example, or deep fried foods. Those are your unhealthy fats. What we're talking about is fats that are naturally found in foods like oily fish, nuts and seeds, avocado, olive oil, coconut oil, for example. And when we talk about fat, we're not talking about taking a plate and eating a plate of fat. What we're talking about, that fat being an integral part of the food that we eat on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really key. That's about getting real food into the body. So a meal high in good fats, for example, could be a piece of salmon with steamed greens that have some olive oil poured over. You could even sprinkle some nuts and some ground seeds on top of that. And then you could have, say, some avocado on the side. You know, that's quite a good fat-rich meal in itself.
Well, you know, we talk about there's all these different layers to thinking of your meal in that way. And one of the layers is that I did an interview with Sally Fallon-Morell for her new book, Nourishing Fats. And what came out of that interview was a discussion of fats as a source of nutrition. Animal fats in particular are a source of fat-soluble vitamins A, D, and K. And these are vitamins that you're not getting in plant fat. So there's a place for olive oil, there's a place for coconut oil, but there's also a place for animal fats. But then the second part of that is like, if you have that delicious meal you just described, that now my mouth is watering because it's lunchtime as we're recording this. And now I'm like, I really want that salmon with the vegetables drizzled in olive oil with some seeds. Like, that's delicious. But on the avocado on the side, if I were to eat that, I'm going to be satiated. I'm going to be very, very satisfied for a long time
as well. Exactly. And you're not going to be dipping into the cookie jar within half an hour of eating your meal. You're probably going to just walk past the cookie jar and think, oh, good, I'm glad the lid's still on that guy, because you're not going to feel like eating anything else. And I think that's the key. And it's so important that you mentioned vitamins A, D, E, and K, your fat-soluble vitamins, so that we're getting in from the foods that we eat, but it helps us to absorb the fat-soluble vitamins as well. So we're not functioning optimally if we don't have enough fat, is the key. We also reduce the need for additives and flavorants and sugar, because the food actually has flavor, again, which is you know, for someone that lived on all these low-fat meals where you can get something and just pop it in the oven and it's ready in 5 minutes. But then if you look at the ingredients, there's sugar and salt in your meal. You don't need that if you have the right types of fat in your diet.
Well, it's so funny that you say that, because it's when I have friends over to eat, I've had people ask me on regular occasions, like, what did you put in that? Like, why does this taste so good? And it's so funny because just adding back some fat, sauteing your vegetables in butter, if you can tolerate butter, for example, drizzling some olive oil, like, you know what I mean? Like, just adding that extra, you're exactly right. Like, this is not a diet devoid of fun. And
exactly.
Yeah, like I believe food should be enjoyable. I actually believe that food is a way that we express love as a human race, totally. As a culture. If you think about it, every celebration, every event, every get together, food is the center of it. And I think traditionally, if you look at traditional cultures, the food was also nourishing. It wasn't just entertainment. So that's how food used to be a source of nutrition. Whereas now we've kind of shifted from that because food is now entertainment. Like, if you look at a Twinkie, it's entertainment.
Oh God, I haven't heard the word Twinkie for ages. You don't get them in the UK, but South Africa, I think it was like this. I can remember the kiss of cream and a hug of sponge or something like that. I can't even remember because I ate so many Twinkies. But I just feel that, coming from a Greek Italian background, every single situation was centered around food, whether you were being told that you've done well or whether you've been told off that you had done something wrong. You had a meal to celebrate. And everybody has a different relationship to food, but we're still hardwired for tougher times where food equals survival. But, for many of us in the Western world, it's a hobby or merely something that isn't done a lot because convenience is at its highest at the moment. So therefore, why should we be spending time in the kitchen where we could be getting something? I mean, you're just one tap away from a meal being delivered to your door, and you could be sitting on your phone, looking at apps. I'm taking it overboard here, but this is modern life. Modern life has completely changed, and we've moved away from this using food as nourishment. And exactly, so when it's more like now it's entertainment, and these food-like products is what's causing a major impact on our health, on our period, on our hormone, on our fertility.
Well, and just to go back for a minute with regards to the cravings. So, I get a lot of questions for listeners, like, how do you optimize the diet if you don't eat meat? So if you are working with a client who doesn't eat either very much or at all any meat, how do you help them to balance their meals so that they're able to balance that kind of combination of carbohydrates with fat and protein?
So all vegetarian sources of protein are carbohydrates as well. So that's something to bear in mind. So it's very important that you're getting in lots of dark green leafy vegetables, peppers, like salad veg as well. And what I tend to do is make sure that you are not having your refined carbohydrates, unless you're running a marathon. You want to be having complex carbohydrates. So we're talking about brown rice, we're talking about quinoa, buckwheat. So you could have buckwheat noodles, for example, which have protein in as well. And then you can have some tofu. I know that tofu, people talk about soy and they get really concerned about, should we or shouldn't we be having soy? And my viewpoint from what I've understood from the literature is that, having soy as it's meant to be in its fermented form can be part of your healthy diet. And if I look to how it's eaten in the Asian cultures, it's more of a condiment as opposed to the main part of your meal. So I think that's how I talk to my clients about bringing it in. And then having your beans and pulses as well. So if you're going to have a meal that's high in beans and pulses and you're having like white pasta with that's a really carbohydrate rich meal. So you want to balance that out by bringing in some dark green leafy veg and making sure that you're bulking out your meals as well with additional fiber and additional phytonutrients and nutrients coming in from the vegetables. Does that make sense?
It does. It's hard though, because the inherent challenge is that you're trying to get your protein source from the carbohydrate source. And so from a sugar balancing perspective, it's a challenge. It's a balancing act.
But it's not impossible, because then every person that's vegetarian or vegan, plant-based, whatever the preferred way of addressing it is, would have an issue with blood sugar balance. Now, I've actually about to publish post a blog on, is your vegan diet causing a problem with your hormones? And it's exactly what we're talking about here. It's about getting that protein in. And a lot of the time when I'm working, especially with fertility clients, it's about like, can we bring some fish in? Would you be open to eating some eggs? And it's not judgmental or anything like that. It's more of an observation. And when I'm looking at a food diary as to what are your goals and how can I best help you achieve those goals? And sometimes it is bringing in some additional fish if vegetarian, so more of a pescatarian type diet, or if vegan, then it's got to be really strict on finding your balance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting topic because it depends on the person that you're working with. Although there's an idea of this kind of optimal diet, when you look at what people are actually eating, you see that there's a lack of protein and balance in terms of that. And so it's what you said, it's being very intentional, being very mindful. And in my case, it involves looking at your menstrual cycle. And
Exactly.
your menstrual cycle will give you the answer. Like if you see problematic trends in your menstrual cycle and you're kind of doing everything quote unquote right, then at some point you have to look at the diet and see if that could be the reason that your hormones are out of balance.
I think that that's a key thing. And our body gives us these little symptoms and these little niggly clues that we can ignore. So maybe your cycle's suddenly gone from a 30-day cycle to a 40-day cycle, or your bleed has become really heavy, or your bleed has become really light, and your cycle is suddenly a 25-day cycle. And if that's one cycle, cycles can change from month to month. But if this is something that's continuous and it's happening, then we need to address that, and we need to see what's the cause of that. And everyone needs to make their own decision as well as to what their goals are and what they want to achieve. So for example, if it's fertility, or whether it's whatever that goal is, and then you have to make the changes, because in order to see a change, you have to make a change. And I think that's quite powerful. So, and it's not coming from a place of judgment. It's not coming from a place of anything other than observation as to what I've seen in clinic and what I've experienced myself, because I've been vegan. I was the most unhealthy vegan that ever walked this earth. I did not have a clue what I was doing. It was my early 20s. For me, it was the catalyst that actually led down the path of eating disorders. I basically lived on air.
Oh, no.
Because I was eating rice cakes because they were vegan, and then I was eating like a bowl of white pasta because that's vegan, and there was no nutrients coming in, nothing, but maybe from half an apple that I may have eaten, or from the low-fat yogurt. Yeah, there was no nutrients coming from that. So there was sugar in it. It's so important to look at your diet from a bird's eye view as well.
Mm-hmm.
So do a food diary. I'm very big on food diaries. It's the best tool that you have to investigate what's going on in your diet, and then listen to your symptoms from your body. You listen to those clues, look at your cycle. Your cycle is an amazing report every month, or it doesn't come every month, and that's another report in itself.
Mm-hmm. Well, and one of the things that I love about kind of to wrap up our topic about cravings and how to organize the diet, we often think that it's all about diet, all about what I'm eating or what I'm not eating. But what I love about what you talk about in the book when you talk about managing cravings is the important role of sleep in regulating hormones. So I think that might be a nice place for us to go into hormones. How important is sleep when it comes to managing our cravings?
Absolutely important. I tell you what, I am now, so I'm a year postpartum, and I'm still like, I've got a newborn. She's like, I have not slept properly for a year, and my brain has taken a beating, but I also feel that my hormones are not able to balance to where they should be at this stage of postpartum, because I'm not getting enough rest. So we need to prioritize sleep. We are designed to rest. This is exactly what we need to be doing, and that's where digestion happens. It's where repair happens. It's where detoxification happens. It's hopefully not too much digestion happening. I hope you haven't eaten too close to bed, and it's where your hormones happen as well. And it's also has a big knock-on effect on your melatonin production and your stress hormone. So if we just talk about stress hormone in itself, we are lucky that we have this fight or flight response within the bodies that helps us to get out of danger. Our nervous system, our sympathetic nervous system is engaged, and then we have the pituitary and the brain. I'm just break it down here, speaking to the adrenal glands, which are your stress hormone glands. So we've got this fantastic connection in the body, and so we're faced with this danger, and we're able to mount the stress response, and we would secrete adrenaline, which we all understand what adrenaline feels like, and then we also secrete cortisol, which has a similar function with adrenaline. But our cortisols it's such an interesting one. And I talk about it a lot in the book. And I feel that this is one of the reasons, the fat-free, the sugar, the cortisol, the lack of sleep. These are the things that are causing this hormonal storm within the body. And cortisol is, very simply put, your body's going to favor making cortisol above making your sex hormones. They get broken down along the same pathways, and your body is going to want to get you out of danger over wanting you to have enough estrogen for ovulation or progesterone to keep pregnancy. And this is modern life. So what's happening is that we're staying awake for longer, we're sleeping less. This is a stress on the body. What's happening there is that we're actually keeping that cortisol activated for longer than what it needs to be during the day. So cortisol should drop off in the evening, and that helps to stimulate your melatonin production. But if we're staying awake, staring at our phones, looking at our laptops, looking at our iPads, watching TV, getting really stressed about all sorts of modern day stresses, so we can't take that stress away, but we're not allowing our body to shut down for sleep, this is having a catastrophic effect on our hormones. And what it's also doing is it's reducing it's having a knock-on effect on our satiety and our hunger hormones as well. So ghrelin and leptin as well.
Well, it's such a big topic to think about, balancing hormones. Topic. It's so tempting to think that, I just need to take this one supplement and it's going to boost my, levels of this and everything's going to be great. But it's a really big topic that we're tackling here. So, I mean, given everything that we're talking about, we've covered quite a bit of ground. Like we've talked about different ways to balance hormones and different ways to manage cravings and all of those types of things. And so there's so much more we could dive into in the book. Like I'm biting my tongue because we're getting to the end of our time. And there's so much more that we could talk about. But for the listener who tuned in because she wants to learn more about how to balance her hormones, how to optimize her hormones and her cycle for fertility, from your own personal experience and also from your experience writing this book, what are kind of the top 3 takeaways that she can kind of leave this episode with in terms of balancing her hormones or really kind of getting on her path to getting everything regulated?
I totally agree. It's such a big subject as well. And, when we're talking about hormones, we're not just talking about the sex hormones. Your thyroid hormone comes into play, the stress hormones that we spoke about. Insulin is a hormone, so balancing that out. So I think that the first thing that if you're looking at balancing your hormones and remembering that balance of hormone is going to lead to a better or a more balanced menstruation pattern. So really important. And also then looking further down the line, balancing hormones is going to reduce those perimenopausal and those menopausal symptoms, which, as women, we're going to pass through those gates. It's so important to balance the hormones. And it's so important to also be kind to yourself. So I'm going to start with that point. Is one, we need some self-love. We need to understand that balancing hormones is about consistency above perfection. So it's not about suddenly wanting to become an absolute perfectionist in everything that you do, because that in itself is going to stress the body more. And balancing your blood sugar levels needs to be the foundation. It needs to be the key player in your blood sugar balance arsenal that you have. And that is protein with every meal or snack, getting in the good fats, getting rid of the sugar and the refined carbohydrates and replacing them with complex carbohydrates, as well as really looking after your digestion, something we didn't discuss, but I talk about it in the book. It's one of my pillars. It's where I call them my eco warriors, and that's looking after your gut flora so that we're able to actually absorb the nutrients from the food that we eat, because we need those cofactors to be able to synthesize hormones. Plus, as well, we need to poop. Really important. A poop a day keeps the doctor away. So I've changed the apple a day. And really important because we need to get rid of this spent estrogen in the body that our liver has so beautifully packed up for us. And then if we're talking about the whole digestive area, we need to look at getting in what I call my detox warriors. Those are your dark green leafy leaves, your cruciferous vegetables, bringing them in. as well. And that really forms a balanced diet and a balanced lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Angelique, for taking us through that. I'm really excited for your book, and I'm happy
Thank
that it's
you.
out there. And I know that it's going to help a lot of women. And we didn't even mention that. So half of the book contains some helpful information about hormones and, basically some of the things that we spoke about in our interview. And the other half is a cookbook. And
Yes,
so I love that because it's
Yeah.
tangible. It's something that it allows us to put it into action right
Yeah.
away, which is what we really need to do, right? Because I mean, the theory only takes you so far. You have to actually get in the kitchen and make stuff.
Exactly. And I'm so pleased you mentioned that. I can't believe I didn't mention that already, but there's a 28-day meal plan with all the recipes. And what I've done is I've devised this with a busy woman in mind, because I don't have time to stand in the kitchen for hours, and your dinners double up as your lunch the next day. So, and it's really about giving you those tools and adding in loads of recipes into your recipe bank as well, that you can continue with post the 28 days. But following that, I've had such amazing results where I cry every time I get the emails where ladies have followed the plan and they've seen so many changes in their cycle, fallen pregnant, lost weight, amenorrhea, so their periods coming back. So it's a great starting point. And I love to just also say about the book is that following the plan and following the 6 pillars that I have in the book is going to show us like one of 2 things. One, it's either going to make you feel so much better and get things into alignment again and get you feeling, energized and your periods regular, or it's going to really drive home the fact that further investigation needs to be done.
I love that you said that so much, because that's how it works with issues around fertility, issues of menstrual cycle health. You either hit the nail on the head, lift the weight, and everything is able to kind of fall into alignment, or you hit a block, like you hit a roadblock, and that is an indication that you have not hit the nail on the head. But it doesn't mean that you can't find out what the problem is. It just means further.
Exactly.
So I love that you said that. I think that's a really great place to end off today, because I know that you and I could talk forever.
I know. We really could.
We totally could. Maybe we can just let the listeners know where they can go to get your beautiful new book, and if they're interested in working with you, or if they happen to live in your area, where they can go to find more information about that.
Great, thank you. And thanks so much again for having me. The book's available on Amazon.com and .co.uk. It's available. It's actually just been translated into German as well, so it's available in Germany, and you can get it from most good bookstores. So I'm really, really grateful that it's pretty much, you can get it anywhere, which is great. And I'm based in London, but I also do a virtual clinic. So my website is angeliquepanagos.com. And so I see clients either face-to-face or virtually. So it doesn't matter where in the world you are for that. And then also I have my social media health tribes, which I'd love for anyone that would want to join. It's another thing that I always say is like, find your tribe. We, as humans, we're tribal. It really helps to find your tribe and find the people that are going to lift you up. And so on social media, I'm Angelique Panagos as well. And I'd love to connect with anyone there.
All right. Well, we will have the links to your social media and your website, and of course your book, in the show notes for the podcast. So if anyone's on the go, you don't have to worry about writing it all down. And I just want to thank you so much, Angelique, for coming back on the show. It was my pleasure to have you, and
Thank you.
Best of luck with the new book and with everything that you're doing.
And thank you so much for having the show. I think that I know quite a few people that listen to it, and they definitely gaining so much from it. So thank you so much for serving us in that way.
Thank you so much, Angelique. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode over at fertilityfriday.com/198. I hope that you enjoyed my interview with Angelique. It was great having her back on the show to celebrate the release of her new book, The Balanced Plan. And what I appreciate about Angelique's perspective, just like the name of the book, is that it is balanced, and it does involve a sensible approach to nutrition and food and really getting at how to balance those hormones. So having you actually think about how your nutrition affects your hormones, how your nutrition affects your menstrual cycles and affects your overall health, and really focusing on giving the body what it needs. So I really appreciate Angelique for being on the show today. So I just want to thank you for taking the time, spending some time with me today, supporting the show. I really appreciate all of you for tuning into the show, for listening to the show. I always say that I podcast for you, and I really just appreciate having the support of the Fertility Friday community. And it's such an amazing community of women who are really just passionate about learning about their menstrual cycles, teaching anyone who will listen. And so I really appreciate all of you for sharing the show, sharing different episodes with your friends, and really just spreading the word. Because as I always say, I do have a vision that, someday every single woman will know how her body and her fertility works. And I actually believe it. I believe that we can do it. And I also believe that it's just going to happen one woman at a time. So I really appreciate you for being part of the Fertility Friday community. If you are wanting to jump in and chat with other members of the community about today's episode, there's always great conversations going on in the Fertility Friday Facebook community. So just head over to fertilityfriday.com/community to jump in there. And also, if you are looking for additional support with charting your cycles, if you're really ready to gain that confidence in using fertility awareness for birth control, I get a lot of emails from women who they've listened to the show, they've discovered the show, discovered some of the challenges and some of the side effects associated with birth control. And so, getting to that stage where they're ready to jump off the pill, but not wanting to get pregnant and really just feeling scared about trusting this method to effectively prevent pregnancy. So if that's you and you're really having a hard time trusting it, I always say, you can get it from that kind of mental standpoint. You can read a book and get it intellectually, but it's a totally different thing to use it, to actually use it as a birth control method with your partner and feel really confident and really good about the fact that you know what you're doing and you're not going to get pregnant until you want to. So if that's you, make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/work with me. This is what I do. I support women to gain confidence in using this method for birth control. I've used the method myself for birth control for 17 years, other than the, 2 short occasions where I was actively trying when I wanted to start my family. So for the majority of the time I've been using this method, I've actually been using it strictly for birth control. And I've supported hundreds of women at this point to achieve their intentions. So whether they're actively trying to conceive or whether they are actively avoiding. So make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/work with me for more information about ways that we can work together so we can get you confident about using fertility awareness to avoid pregnancy. And when you're ready to get pregnant, using fertility awareness to achieve pregnancy. So thanks again for tuning into today's episode. And as always, be well and happy charting.